and welcome to the SBN Newscast with your hosts, Scott and Kendra. This will be our 24th episode today, featuring an interview special to add to our collection of previous shows where we have chatted to over 47 of our amazing members and partners. If you're only just catching our SBN Newscast, remember you can subscribe to be alerted when our episodes go live, and you can also catch up to hear from our previous guests via YouTube. And as always, if you're watching and you would like to join us for a chat, get in touch. And if you're a member of SBN and you have a good collaboration story to share with us, let us know. It might be a good one for us to feature on this show or use in our SBN in Action segment at our monthly SBN showcase as we prepare to launch our autumn series of events.
Yeah, we've got some exciting guests to add to that today, but before we start, here's what's been happening in the past 2 weeks. SBN Chairman Russell Dalgleish was the author of this week's Daily Business article as he looked at how to reapproach physical meetings now that restrictions are being eased across the country. There was some more press to catch up on as well as blockchain technology partners announced the exciting news that they've completed their £2 million seed investment. You can learn more about that by checking out their website because it's really exciting news. Congratulations as well to Scotland Is. They've announced Alison McLaughlin as their new chair. Tom Thomas has continued his weekly updates from India as well and some other news, so be sure to check out the SBN website for that. New editions come out every Friday. Speaking of continuing news, the SBN podcast series is back. Fraser Allen's back after his short holiday to chat to Eric McAfee, the Californian farm boy who turned into venture capitalist and global Scot. You can catch all the episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Scottish Business Network. Speaking of podcasts, the Net Zero Nation podcast is still going strong. If there's an episode I could recommend, you should listen to episode 2, where James and Gavin talk about the inspiration behind the 2045 Net Zero tartan, which has been designed by rebels in the Scottish Highlands. A shout out is in order as well for Bruce Walker and his fantastic Purist Gin. His terrific story has been featured in the Evening Standard, outlining how he managed to create an award-winning business in lockdown. More great news from AM Bid as well, as they've opened up 2 positions through the Kickstarter scheme. Check out the link in the description of this video to see the opportunities for 18 to 24-year-olds to work with the great team at AM Bid. And other than news, there's some events to keep an eye out for. Africa Scotland Business Network are in the middle of their fantastic energy technology series. Themselves and Scottish Development International will be showcasing the latest Scottish technologies, introducing some fantastic speakers from the government, leading energy experts, investors in the Scottish and African private sector, and of course, the tech innovators trailblazing some of the game-changing technology that's going to help us get through this climate crisis. In other hosted events, Carbon Financial are continuing their event series on July 28th as they have an evening of great rugby insights and entertainment from 2 great characters and legends of the game in Paul O'Connell and Bob Skinstad. London Scotch Rugby, speaking of rugby, had a celebratory lunch yesterday at the Caledonian Club in London as they had a proper send-off for some of those retiring and stepping down from their roles that have really helped get the club where it is today. So congratulations to them. And there's one more event. Who is it again? Oh, yes, us. We're back. We're delighted to be hosting our first in-person SBN gathering, hosted by our London Relationship Ambassador, Johnny Downey, on September 7th in London Scottish House. We're going to be bringing members together for some informal drinks, some networking, and just getting to see everybody again after what feels like 10 years. So it'll be really exciting to see that. But that's us for news and events today. And even bigger news, we're going to be hearing about this week's Hebridean Scotch Whisky Bond special.
Yes, today we're delighted to welcome Director and Project Manager at Uisge Beatha, Katherine Frangos, and CEO Peter Brown. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you today?
Great. Excited to be here.
Before we start, I wanted to ask if you could both introduce yourself and tell us a bit about who are Uisge Beatha.
Yes, my name's Peter Brown. We have been working at setting up a distillery on the island for a few years, and we have now formed a community benefit society. I'm not originally from the island, but I've lived there for a short time, about 25 years. So eventually I'll be considered as an islander. At the moment, however, I'm still an incomer.
Very good. And my name is Katherine. So I originally am from the States. I was working in the US oil and gas industry as a mechanical engineer before coming to Scotland in 2019 to study sustainable energy. During that time, I focused in on island energy systems in the Outer Hebrides, and that's how I met Peter. And so I joined the Uisge Beatha and Eilean team in October, and it's been a fantastic adventure ever since. And now I'm based in Edinburgh.
Terrific. Well, thank you both for joining us. Just as we start, one thing that we've seen blow up across Scotland in recent years are things like gin distilleries and microbreweries, often located somewhere around Scotland's bigger population centres. So how did the vision for a community distillery in the Isles of Barra and Vatersay even begin?
Well, I think it's fair to say that there has been, as you say, an explosion in gin in this country. I think you get to the point where you say how much more of an explosion can be sustained. We have no wish or desire to produce gin. We never have had. We're going for the main game, which is whiskey, which is what is the traditional drink of the islands. I mean, gin was introduced to London by William of Orange. It doesn't even have a long tradition in England, let alone in Scotland. It would kind of be absurd to be producing gin in the Hebrides. What makes whiskey different is it's made from barley. And barley was introduced really with the Neolithic people. They grew barley to live. And so the obvious thing to make your fermentations or distillations from is barley, and that's what whiskey is made from. So there's a very, very long tradition of brewing and distilling using barley. The recent history, well, for the last 300 years, if you call that recent, has been of taxation, strong, heavy taxation on whiskey distilling. And that meant there's an awful lot of whiskey distillers didn't really bother about registering. They carried on making the whiskey without anybody bothering about it. And that was the case throughout the Outer Hebrides. There were no licensed distillers in the Hebrides until briefly in the 19th century. One did pop up for a short time, but it couldn't compete with the illicit ones. And when we come to the Second World War, the whole question of whiskey is thrown into massive relief when there is a shortage. There's a shortage because all the illicit stills have by that time been shut down by customs and excise. And all the production of whiskey is going to the United States to pay for armaments and the war effort. So when a ship destined for the States with a load of, assorted materials, I mean, bathroom suites, banknotes, there was an enormous selection of, she had a really big ship, much, much larger than the ferries that come out to Barra nowadays. And she went aground just off Uisge, between Barra and South Uist. And the customs men came to relieve what they could off the ship. But then having got what they could, they then welded the hatch covers down. And the islanders thought, well, this is ridiculous. There's still whiskey in there. There's lots of whiskey still in there. I mean, eye-wateringly large amounts of whiskey still in there. So they unwelded the hatches and got in and proceeded with a fairly lengthy unofficial salvage operation, which then became slightly adapted. I mean, come to Mackenzie, when he wrote his book, Whisky Galore, he didn't go into any detail. He made it sound much more romantic and much more illicit. But it is the case that a few people actually were taken to court and accused of removing whisky from the ship. They were taken off in procession to Inverness jail, and they were treated like kings. So the Whisky Galore story was filmed entirely in the Outer Hebrides. So we're, if you like, following an ongoing tradition. It's had a few bumps and humps on the way, but there's an increasing number of distilleries now in the Hebrides, and we're the next one in the line.
I wanted to ask a little bit more about the community benefit aspect of the project. Now, that's not a standard way of setting up a whisky distillery. So what is the difference between a community benefit society compared to a more traditional private distillery that is more of the norm here in Scotland?
So a community benefit society helps to lock in the assets and the benefits of the business to the community of interest for the long term. So you may be already familiar with Glenwivus outside of Inverness. And so they are actually the first Scotch whisky distillery company in Scotland to be set up as a community benefit society. And we are very proud to be joining them as the second. And so in Barra and Vatersay, like many places across the Highlands and Islands, through history, you have mass immigration, the Highland clearances, and now today there's tends to be a limited amount of long-term sustainable jobs in these places that are not dependent on tourism. And so some of our key benefits that we look to bring to the island include sustainable jobs, year-round tourism. Whiskey tourism brings in the off-shoulder and off-peak visitors to the islands. There's actually this Hebridean and Scotch whiskey trail that we're excited to be joining across the Hebrides as well. And we're going to be investing our profits into the community to help bring further sustainable energy, affordable housing, and the other investments that can help support social and economic development.
Community benefit societies are a kind of hybrid between a co-op and a joint stock company. You buy shares in them. You vote at the AGM. They have directors. But the whiskey industry is dominated by two major players, and they own about 80% of the production of Scotch whisky. Neither of them are based in Scotland. And new distilleries are very vulnerable to hostile takeover. We see it with monotonous regularity. A community benefit society gives the distillery protection against hostile takeover. It means that the business will always be owned and run on the island. It's never going to be part of a big multinational combine. It'll always be local to the Outer Hebrides.
It's a really key point, because as Katherine mentioned as well, with the sort of history of that part of Scotland and even modern day as well, there has been a tendency for lack of a better term, a brain drain. So with something like this project on that part of the country, we'll encourage people to stay. One other thing I want to touch on is what Katherine pointed out as well, is about the sort of environmental impact that businesses have to be keenly aware of as they continue to grow. And I know that Barra Distillery have committed to the global goal by making the UN Race to Zero pledge. And you've got a lot of exciting goals, or a lot of exciting green goals. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about that, about what you've got planned for the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott. So we already own the distillery site. And on that site, we have 4 operating wind turbines and our water reservoir as well, Loch Uisge. And so we are actually exploring further ways to decarbonize the distillery, looking into incorporating low carbon thermal energy storage into the distillery design, which will help us further reduce the amount of grid purchased electricity we require to power our facility and our operation. But then also this helps to expand the capacity of low carbon energy on the Isle of Barra. So then as further grid policy improvements are made that make energy balancing more flexible, we'll be able to help deliver decarbonized energy to the entire island as we go.
Now, I'm sure the people watching this will be wanting to understand what's next and how they can help you. So can you tell us a little bit more about the upcoming bond offer and what that entails?
So absolutely. We are proud to partner with Scottish Communities Finance in launching the new Hebridean Scotch Whisky Bond, which goes live next week. And so this exciting opportunity is a way for investors around the world to help support us as we continue this journey.
I think there's a general perception, which perhaps is starting to change, but it's still there, that social enterprise or community enterprise is not for making profit. However, these bonds are a method of investing in the organization and making profit. The investor puts in money, in our case for a 10-year period, into Uisge Beatha, and we pay interest, a serious amount of interest actually, by the end of the 10 years. So everybody benefits. So in other words, you don't have to lose money to create a community benefit. You're actually earning money and doing good in the local community.
And then something else to add as well, that we are anticipating members of the Scottish diaspora, whiskey enthusiasts around the world, people of the wider Clan MacNeil, which Barra is home to, and others that are interested in ethical and social investments to become quite interested in this opportunity. And through conversations that we've had already with potential investors, it's key that the story of the Isle of Barra And the whiskey opportunity here is quite exciting. And so we're thrilled to be a part of that.
Yeah, and the story's so much better as well. You could have a fancy bottle of Johnny Walker, or you could have one from Barra Distillery with the story behind it.
Absolutely.
So you see the bond's open next week. How long is it open for, and what sort of things can people do to get involved?
So the bond will open next week, and it will be running through December this year. And please reach out. So you can find us by searching Hebridean Scotch Whisky Bond online, and you can follow us as well through our own social media. And feel free to look up Scottish Communities Finance, their social media channels too. And we're excited to talk to you more about the story. We can share more about Barra and our plans, and we're excited to be able to announce the opening.
I think the point, Scott, about exclusivity is a very important one. One of the things we are going to be doing is that every bottle will be from an individual cask. That sounds obvious, but what other distilleries do is they mix it all up. We're not going to do that. Your bottle will come from a specific cask. It'll have a description of the characteristics of that cask, the strength of that cask, and it will be a numbered bottle. You can guarantee that there are only another 200 bottles like the one you've got in the world. So when you pull your whiskey out to offer somebody in the boardroom or after dinner, you can be 99% sure that nobody else has ever tasted it. So when you talk about exclusivity, we're right up there. We're doing something as a small scale distillery that the big distilleries are simply not equipped to do. They're equipped to produce stuff on a production line. We are producing stuff using real people.
And you've got the story behind it that goes back into the community of Barra and Vatersay.
Well, precisely, because that's the way whiskey used to be produced. The advent of homogeneous, samey whiskies, which were all merged together to produce a consistent product, that's only about 100 years old. In the old days, the whiskey distiller would take his cask to the grocer in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dundee, and they'd be sold by the cask. And once that cask was finished, they moved on to the next cask. And that's what we're going back to. We're going back to first principles, the way it was always done before.
Wow, incredible. Well, thank you very much both for joining us and telling us about this exclusive bond offer. I'm sure more people want to know more about it, so we'll be speaking to you again, and we'll definitely be sharing in the description how people can get involved and how they can help spread the word. So thank you for joining us and telling us a little bit more. And I know that we'll have some pictures of the distillery on this video as well for people to see Barra Distillery. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll keep up with any updates from you. So thanks.
Thank you so very much.
Thanks a lot. That was good, yes.
Thanks again to our guests today, Katherine and Peter, for joining us.
And to all those watching, the bond goes live on Tuesday, July 27th. You can learn more about that on their website, and keep an eye out for the news about the launch next week.
Bye.
Bye.